My view, and it's a dissentient one, is we haven't really had a proper government in one respect or another since before the First World War. We've moved with the times, we've shuffled and shifted, we've had one bourgeois group in and after another, slightly centre-left, slightly centre-right, in the middle. We blundered and made do during the hungry 30s. We staggered into the Second World War. We lost all our money and had to be bailed out by the Americans. We had a mildly state socialist regime after the Second World War. The process which began multiracialism began in 1948 with the Nationality Act, when Attlee passed in the House of Commons an act which said, and this is what Attlee said in the House of Commons during the vote on it, the races of the world need to be mixed together. We have learned from a history of war and change. We have learned that peoples need to be mixed together so that they will become friends, and hostility will end. That is why a nodal point of 50,000 passports were disseminated in the Caribbean Basin and in the post-Raj India, which we left when the flag was hauled down under Mountbatten in 1948. Then immigrants started coming. Then their extended families started coming. Then when they had beachheads, they brought in other people. Then you added the refugee codicils to UN treaties that we signed up to in the mid to late 1940s as the backwash from the Second War. Then you add in various other post-imperial groups in African and other societies, such as the Ugandan nations and the Kenyan nations, which he said he wouldn't let in, but then did for allegedly compassionate reasons during his left Tory administration between 1970 and 74. The Tories managed this change to a certain degree. The Tories are at least in contact with the premises of national identity to the degree that they're worried about things if they turn sour. They allow basically, legally, the illegals nobody knows, and it's difficult to assess, and the state refuses in part to have proper statistics, but they are difficult to acquire. Up to 97 under Major and Thatcher before, less under her, 100,000 coming in. Blair tripled it, it's 300,000. That's 300,000 a year over 10 years. That's the 3 million that have come in under New Labour. New Labour partly sees many of these people as new voters for them. As a Labour councillor once said to me, they're the new proletariat. They'll vote for us because we give them the benefits and we give them the cheap jobs. And therefore they're our people. Of course, life's more complicated than that, because when Labour get in, they suddenly find they're part of the global elite, and they have to make decisions about Third World Wars in the Third World. Wars in Iraq, wars in Afghanistan, wars in Sierra Leone, which are very unpopular outside the West. Turn off Western telly and listen to the English version of Al Jazeera, you'll realise what much of the rest of the world thinks about these wars. So on the one hand, they're the immigrant's friend, and on the other hand, they're bombing many of their co-racialists and co-religionists elsewhere in the world. This is what real power is like. You have to make choices. They want American strength, they want the American nuclear umbrella, they want the money that flows in, they want the kudos of being the 51st state of the Union on this side of the world, they want to be the bridge between the US and Europe and the structures of the European Union. Paradoxically, they want to go further into Europe, which means technically going further away from the United States, but you can configure that in a different way, but they don't really like the struggles that go with the reality of American dominance. Dominance always gets people against you. Before 9/11, at the turn of this millennium, there were certain people who said history had ended. There was a Japanese-American social scientist and historian called Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History. It's all over. The future is shopping, and mass sport, and TV for all, and peace and harmony and plenty for all. He's not an ecologist. Then planes went into the towers in New York, and people looked around and realised that the world had changed. Because when you have a great power, you raise great enmity in other groups. Now, Islam has been asleep in some respects, external to itself, external to the crescent between Morocco and Indonesia for 1,000 years. But it's woken up now in this millennium. And it doesn't like many Western policies. Blair is in the Middle East. Remember him, our ex-premier? He's in the Middle East pleading for peace. And that the Palestinians and the Israelis will make peace, which would certainly make things a lot easier for the present elite that runs the West. But they're not going to. Because there's no possibility of a solution to that particular conflict. One group will dominate the other. That's how it always is. There's two groups on one bit of land. There's not room for two states. And persons of colour throughout the world support the Palestinian cause all over the world, even if they're the weaker ones now. When we have non-white MPs in our parliament, they go two ways. They either adhere to the present elite and mouth their politically correct slogans, or they adopt the view of the third world.